Hi, Denny Johnson here, and I'm with Ellen Tart-Jensen, and we're about to discuss the family tree and its correspondence to health, well-being. Well, whatever the topic is for today, it's about glands, organs, body systems. Ellen?
So Denny, we've talked about the law of compensation, the law of attraction, and we've talked a lot about fear and forgiveness and healing of fear. We've talked about addictions, and we've also talked about various illnesses that come to a person. And you were saying that if we look at different parts of the body, it gives us a clue as to where some of our feelings and internal emotional discord is coming from.
Well,
can you explain that a little bit about the parts of the body?
let me just preface this by saying I really don't know very much, because there is a vast amount of this that we've seen.
Right.
You and I have been involved in some form of therapeutic practice with people, teaching process for decades.
Right.
And I think as we get older, especially for me, I'm older, you're not, that we realize that we don't really know that much.
Exactly.
And the further we get into this, the more that we realize that there is so much more
to know,
to learn,
yes,
to feel,
yes,
and to be able to leave some teaching in some form or another. So what we're about to discuss is by no means complete, and there's no claim of perfection involved in this. This is just my experience of how the emotions from the family tree, or what we might describe in other cases as the grandparents or the epigenetic influences, and how they affect the body. Let me just describe this map for a moment for those who don't know this. This M means mother and F means father, and the red circles and triangles from the father's side are essentially the father's parents and grandparents. Those would be my great-grandparents and grandparents. And these are the 6 primary influences coming from my father's side that represent the masculine functions of my body, well-being, mind, and so on. Left brain, right brain functions as well. Now this on the blue side is my mother and her parents and grandparents. These are my great-grandparents and my own grandparents. These are the feminine and masculine attributes. Now the reason that this becomes useful is by being able to identify the symptoms a person's going through. Gives me clues about not only the location that it might be coming from, but some idea of the feeling that needs to be felt, or the memories that needs to be processed or forgiven or felt in remorse. That, for example, if something occurs in a specific location, like an organ, like the lungs or the bowels, or it occurs in one place, like the liver. If it occurs primarily in one place, it is related to the feelings of one person. If the experience occurs in multiple places or occurs in a body system, like the immune system or the skeletal system, right, then that relates to a different topography. Rather than being one person, it's how a group or a family is responding to each other. For example, I have a whole series of case studies, but let me give you one of my favorites. There was a woman who was primarily from her father's family based on her birth order sequence, so we won't go into that for now. But she had several conditions. One, she had a whole body form of inflammation, and that inflammation was affecting all of her joints. So I knew right away that inflammation is a form of anger, and because it was affecting all of the systems, it was a group dynamic anger rather than just one person. but she also had a specific condition, like a cancer in the liver, that turned out to be in a specific location in combination with it. When we got the family history from the father's side of the family, it turned out to be that her father's parents were a couple from a family. These, by the way, obviously these two families on this side, my father's mother, my father's father, before this moment they weren't related.
Oh.
These two families actually were Scottish Highland clans who had for a very long time, generations, were involved in violence toward each other, anger toward each other. Then, like a Romeo and Juliet situation, these two fall in love, get married, run away to the USA, thinking they would leave behind their ancestry.
They still have the family tree.
That's right. So it comes down to this daughter or great-granddaughter here, and what you find out is the inflammation is the group against a group that's now inside the family tree genetics.
Right.
So when the family tree is attacking the family tree, meaning that there is a previous disposition to attack each other for some reason, it usually attacks the system related to and transference of feelings, the immune system, and where it goes to the skeletal system, or it goes to the circulatory system or something, digestive system, is often what they were fighting about. Later on you'll find that the topics of what they fought about, for example, if they fought about religion, which was different than money.
Right.
For example, there's another case study very similar to this one, where the mother's parents were quite wealthy, and the father's parents were quite poor, and the father's mother's parents would not allow the family of the poor family to come to the wedding.
Oh, wow.
So this produced another form of animosity and
About money.
and about stature or class, and which is very different than an argument about religion or God.
Yes.
So these affect body systems in different ways, depending on how big it is. Also, this particular, in the process of the Scottish Highlands one, different than the other, is that the great-grandmother, the mother-in-law, and this is a very interesting series I've seen other times, where the mother-in-law has a hatred for her daughter-in-law,
Yes.
because the daughter-in-law took her son away from her.
Mm-hmm.
Now, later, this position becomes what's corresponding to in the map, the liver.
Right.
So the hatred of this great-grandmother for her daughter-in-law, now 3 generations later, becomes a liver cancer or a difficulty of different forms in the liver, depending on what the hatred was about.
Yes. And didn't you say, Denny, that when this happens, for example, in this person, and there's a problem in the liver, that something triggered that in their life, or something they put out?
That's correct.
Brought that on?
Because now, if there's hatred between the families,
Mm-hmm.
or hatred of this great-grandmother toward her daughter-in-law, this produces what would otherwise be described as a epigenetic trigger or tag,
Right.
to begin to instruct the genes about how to be able to turn on the difficulties in the body.
That may or may not take place.
That's correct. Because in order now, if the great-granddaughter received these epigenetic influences,
Mm-hmm.
but she does not engage in this experience of hatred or family-oriented violence, she doesn't trigger the condition in the body.
But if her parents had that, or perhaps taught that to her, she may not know differently or how to behave differently.
That's correct. So in one situation, it was easier to resolve it in one because In the two cases I had about the wealthy family versus the poor family, and the two families that were engaged in violence toward each other, what it has to be is that she has to engage in the experience of the same behavior by some feeling. So by being able to examine this, doing the family history, she then understands that she engaged in an angry hatred toward her ex-husband for how he treated her and the kids. Now she was actually doing something, an argument or hatred in the family, her own family, that now triggers this to occur in the inflammation of her own body.
And so when she realized that, what was the path that you took her on to help her to turn that around?
Well, the first part of this is simply the aha,
Right.
which to me is the truth. Wow.
Yes.
So by getting the family history, understanding the family history, and having what she had was the knowledge, because she talked to her father about these relationships, and having the father from his own memory describe his grandmother basically hating his mother. Now this is the very powerful position, because later on you'll see another one of these positions that primarily affects another system in the body. This is the elimination channel. This is also the kidney position, and sometimes it's the bowel and kidney position. So these are common places that can occur.
Right.
So that's why I'm bringing these up first. There are many other case studies that describe this. Now what we do is we have a map that describes where they're located in the body. For example, those things, we use a map from 1 to 6. 6 being everything that occurs in the head, has to do with 2 glands associated with the head, the pituitary and the pineal. And they will also eventually correspond to body systems such as the central nervous system or the skin.
Right.
So later on, if we see if there is a brain tumor in the head, we automatically go to the number 6 position in the family tree to examine if there is a difficulty there. For example, if the hatred were in the number 6 great-grandfather, this is likely to cause an inflammation in the brain, or likely to cause an inflammation in the skeletal system, and oftentimes this relates to turning the immune system against the skeletal system or the blood, which is like a leukemia. So where the hatred is determines where it manifests in a gland, organ, or body system. By being able to understand the maps where we've had this, where we can identify it, it gives us the confidence of being able to say to someone, yeah, I never knew my parents, I never knew my grandparents or great-grandparents, but I have these symptoms.
Yeah, because some people can't go back and ask or find out anything about it.
That's correct. So that by doing enough of these case studies, even if we don't know that this is the great-grandmother, for example, this is mother's father's mother. This number 6 is related to the pineal and related to the number 6. And primarily this is pineal, other side is pituitary.
Right.
So there's feminine, masculine glands.
Right.
This is also related to the sleep cycle, night terror experiences. This is everything to do with mood regulation of serotonin, melatonin. So if we have severe skin conditions, one of the first places we look is at the skin great-grandmother.
Yes.
And there's a variety of conditions that occur on the skin. And generally speaking, for example, if there is a religious attack of one group to another group, like Christian, Muslim, Catholic, Protestant, on this side, this produces generally a fire to the skin, which is to me a hives, a shingles, a herpes, a whole series of things that come up to the skin.
Right.
Now there are some, and I'll give you one of the case studies that I thought was quite profound. We had a 7-year-old girl who had a skin condition where her skin just started falling off in sheets.
Wow.
And she started with a patch on her forehead, which gives us a clue because that's the 6.
Yeah.
And then it went all the way over the top of her head, turned her hair white,
Wow.
and her skin literally started falling off. Now, what we know from the study of that is that this is the great-grandmother of the skin. Now, what also occurred in this case is that the great-grandmother was a servant in the house of a wealthy family. She ended up having sex with the son of the landowner, and the landowner also basically funded and owned the church.
Wow.
And the family goes to the church to get the priest of the church to ostracize this woman out of the group. So it's different than a group attacking a group. That's basically red on the skin.
Right.
If it's a group attacking an individual, isolation, then it's a white on the skin or white patches on the skin.
Like vitiligo.
Skin falling off.
Yes.
That's an isolation of one person coming down to the great-grandchild of that particular great-grandmother. Now we have seen a number of cases. For example, this side of the family is primarily involved in, I'll just draw a line down for a moment because this is what I call the cleaning side of the family. This cleaning side of the family uses these 3 connections to these 3 women, mother's father's mother, the skin, and the skin is responsible, and it's quite debatable, 25 to 30% of the cleaning of the body really is through the skin. So if the skin is not really functioning well, the other systems become stressed.
Yeah, it's the largest organ.
It is. And then the second one in the sequence of this is the experience of, this is the bowels, and this is also the venous supply of the blood back to the heart.
Right.
This is a very strong, the bowels are also 25 to 30% of the cleaning of the body.
Yes.
Well, then the last one in this sequence of the cleaning of the whole body is related to the experience of the water line, which is kidney. So this is the 3 primary forms of the cleaning of the water of the body.
Huge elimination channels.
Huge channels of elimination. There are other channels such as the breath. There's other channels such as the liver and even the heart. The immune system obviously is involved in cleaning to lesser degrees. But the 3 on the mother side are related to this. Now, we've had a number of cases where the daughter-in-law hates her mother-in-law in this position, causing a disruption of the ability for the kidney to function correctly. And this shuts down the kidney function, can even stress the bowel function as it attempts to eliminate what's not being eliminated correctly either in the skin or the kidneys, and this produces symptoms in the bowels. So we've learned how to be able to find out where the specific gland, organ, or body system is.
How old was this girl?
This girl was 7. So hers started at 7 and other ones are later. And the age that it occurs when the symptom arrives really begins to show, because there's a timeline how this occurs, which part of the family is transmitting it.
Do you want to show us the timeline quickly?
Go through the timeline. Well, I don't know if it's possible to do it quickly,
Yes.
but there is a timeline that goes, and I'll just draw this out for you for a moment. There's a timeline that goes 0 to 16, and this is called the ascending yin. This is 0 to 16, and there is a timeline continuation that goes from 16 to 32. This is called the ascending yang. That's that time period, and these are the corresponding grandfather numbers, because these 6, they represent the ascending yin and the ascending yang. These are also corresponding to times of the day. So these are the 12 hours from midnight to 12 noon.
Yes.
And then the 12 hours after this, when the sun is on its way down, we have 3 more. As this continues, this is the descending yang as the sun is going down. This influence now is also continuing until you have this is the descending yin, this is sunset, this is sunrise, this is 32, this is 48, this is 64. So what we do is we use, when did this arrive?
So this girl was 7, so she would
She's
come
over here.
over here, yes.
This is 8,
Mm-hmm.
right? So this is 8 years old. So we know that probably it was the result of unresolved feelings coming from this side of the family tree. And we don't know all of the relationship patterns, because remember, like over here, this is a family dynamic. So this is the, father-in-law of this young man,
Mm-hmm.
and these are the in-laws of each side of this.
Right.
And it's quite fascinating how relationships of the in-laws toward each other,
Yes.
because who knows what their community was like before their children got married,
Right.
or what their relationship was like. I had a fascinating case study of a young man who ended up developing severe convulsions,
Mm.
and it turned out to be a epigenetic situation where the great-grandfather that regulates movement in the body
Mm-hmm.
was engaged in a hateful relationship in the community with the great-grandfather that relates to the heart.
Mm-hmm.
And they ended up having this violent relationship about one's an atheist, one's a religious fanatic, and their hatred of each other ends up producing convulsions in the great-grandchild. Now, it's a challenging thing to say that convulsive experience in children is related to violent relationships epigenetically in their ancestry.
But when you think about the genes carrying all this information down to the child, it is understandable.
Yes, it is understandable when you do this, hundreds of times, and you see these influences.
See it over and over again.
You start to go, wow, and you see the opportunity to be able to go, okay, now we, by the understanding of the truth, understand how it's coming through, why it's coming through. Can we use the same level of attention or truth to be able to help to clean up these patterns by, number one, recognizing that in order for it to occur in me, I must be engaged in the experience of the same behavior, maybe in some lesser degree, but still existing.
But if it's only a 7-year-old girl, how might she have brought this upon herself?
Her parents.
Okay.
Because under the age of 8,
Mm-hmm.
her parents had to be engaging in that behavior somewhere in the environment. Oh, by the way, that just happened to be a Mormon family living in Costa Rica,
Interesting.
where the only legal religion in the country is the Catholic Church, and they're Mormon, and the child is, their child is feeling this,
Right.
but they're also engaged in their own religious rejection of the group as well.
Right. And going back to what happened to this person in that family.
So we could go organ by organ, system by system, and we have the basic maps of this, and we're learning more.
But just to go back to this girl, What would be the plan to help a child with that situation, having gone through that family tree?
One of the keys is a series of steps, and part of this is just the humility to begin to see the truth.
Right.
By being able to get the idea of a map objectively, and then coming back and go, okay, if my child has this, can I confirm it? In this case, they could confirm what the life of the great-grandmother was like,
Right.
and they realized that the spiritual ostracism of one group to an individual occurred. Now that child was going through a similar type of an environment, but the parents were actually reacting to their daughter being cut off from a spiritual group because of her own religion.
Yes.
So they were re-triggering it. So part of it was the humility to see the pattern in the family tree.
Right.
And to recognize that the pattern has gone on for over 100 years. So is it directly only linked to this girl's experience?
No.
No. So part of this is to look at the underlying cause-effect relationship about how it arrives, and the first step in that is some degree of humility, which is the willingness to listen with some degree of sincerity, to say, I would really like to do something different, I would like to learn about why, and in this case, their earnestness to do that brought them in contact with me so they could at least consider it. They had the family tree history, and they had a detailed family history, by the way, so they knew all the family history, and they could just have this personal realization that in order for it to stop, because it would all likelihood just continue to the other children in the family and or the grandchildren and great-grandchildren, to go, whoa, I don't want to be involved in this anymore.
Right.
So this humility leads to an experience of the truth, an increase of the understanding of this, including the mechanics, into the opportunity to engage in a free will choice to change it or stop it.
Right. And so being a Mormon in an area where there weren't many Mormons, they could still learn love and compassion. And what did they do to help heal the girl?
Well, what they began to do in some degree of earnestness was to use their own faith to pray about these conditions.
Very good.
You know, so they agreed to do that for their own benefit. Now, I don't remember the exact length of time, but somewhere between 6 and 8 months, this skin condition stopped. Her hair turned from white back to brown again, and she no longer exhibited these physical conditions in herself. Now, there is no certainty that it was genuinely dealt with on a spiritual level, because there are ways of altering these things by the use of imagery or emotions or imagination. There are, if you will, vibrational remedies or natural remedies on a physical biochemical level, which correctly applied can change the symptoms.
Right.
Imagination can change the symptoms. Vibrational elements can change the symptoms without actually changing the reason why it originally occurred. Because the reason why it originally occurred was a spiritual issue.
Yes.
So if it's a spiritual issue that's not resolved, then that spiritual issue will continue even if we've been, you know, intelligent enough to bypass the symptoms by remedies.
Right.
So I don't know if they successfully dealt with it or they just put a Band-Aid on it for now.
Did you give them a prayer or something to do?
Yes, I designed some willingness to focus upon the issues relative to this. Now part of this is, you know, it's a challenging thing to begin to design prayers for people who are engaged in their own, you know, belief systems about something.
Right.
Because, you know, giving them the information, suggesting the prayers. I don't know what they actually are engaged in or what they actually do.
But she got better, which was
She
very
got better.
good. Wow.
Now, we've been through a number of these, including situations like inflammation or eczema or psoriasis, and people that have gone through it, that by the recognition of what the true issues are, they can also begin to resolve these conditions. Then later, for example, you start to realize that in order to activate the experiences on the father side, I need a healthy relationship to father. In the same way that you have a very strong cleaning mechanism on the mother's side of the family, you end up having another equally strong system that is engaged, and I'm just going to draw these numbers for you. You engage these three grandmothers on the other side. These are the three grandmothers designed to assimilate and heal and stabilize.
Oh, great.
So these clean, these build.
Right.
Now, very important because these are related to not only digestion, assimilation, circulation, transmission, but they're involved in literally physically healing the body. So you can begin this cleaning process, but if you have a thorn on the side of the grandmother that basically hated her own daughter-in-law, then this creates an inability for the systems to complete the process of the healing of the physical body, and disturbs the assimilation, because you'll find out later that each one of these glands, organs, and body systems, they affect our ability to be able to digest, assimilate, eliminate, and you need both sides operating in order to be able to clean and build.
Absolutely.
So it's okay, we can be doing a lot of the cleaning work and a lot of biochemical cleaning, healthy stuff, but it is difficult to actually regenerate to the ideal level without the regeneration matrix functioning correctly.
So, Denny, in the world we see like a specific illness suddenly hitting thousands of people around the world. For example, the lungs or the stomach recently. Everyone got a stomach virus. So how does that relate to the family tree, and how is that all connecting with what you're saying?
They're all connected because we will have community issues that come up for a particular community of people, and then there's a larger diameter of that which goes into like a national, sometimes there's a national issue, or if there is a global issue, certain global responses, they are common to everyone.
Right.
For example, the 9/11 in 2001, that was a global experience of everybody on Earth being momentarily focused on this violence in the top of the trade towers.
And feeling terrified.
Feeling terrified, and what that experience felt like in the top of one religion fighting another religion.
Yes.
This produces a series of repercussions.
Right.
Versus one of the ones that's arriving now is the fear or anger about Fukushima in Japan and the result of the pollution of the Pacific Ocean, and how those things are related to future generations.
Yeah, has a direct effect on the thyroid when we have too much radiation.
And how we respond to it.
Right.
So, for example, one of the ones I've heard recently is hearing or throat, neck, eyesight difficulties. So these pop up in clusters.
Yes.
In families or regions or different parts of the world. And then there are certain environmental experiences that to me are remarkably tragic as they occur, like for example the tsunami in 2004, I believe, is it 4 or 5, that came through Thailand.
Right, that was huge.
250,000 people there died in a sudden event.
Yes.
And then what does that mean about what's happening in the world?
Right.
Or the earthquake in Haiti that killed over 200,000 people very quickly.
And relating to each one of their family trees.
That's correct. Or what the
and what they were vulnerable to, individually and collectively.
And collectively what the world was doing to be engaged in that outcome, because if something tragic happens on a global level,
right,
all of us are involved in it.
Yes.
Now these diameters that I'm describing for me are what I call the 3 primary gates.
Okay.
Now these 3 primary gates for me are also rings in the iris.
Right.
Where the innermost ring has to do with the glands, and the glands are primarily everything I feel about myself.
Mm-hmm.
So they are my personal responsibility to engage in the flow of this about how I feel about my own self-image, how I accept responsibility or not, my feelings, my own sadness, my own passion for the world or my own anger. So this is very much about the smallest diameter is myself in relationship to my own feeling about me.
So Denny, a lot of people are not familiar with how we look at the iris, so perhaps we could draw an iris.
Certainly.
And show that innermost ring that has to do with this.
Okay, so we have a pupil, and then we have, quite commonly, we have a series of rings. The innermost ring is oftentimes very close or a reasonable distance. It can be varying distances from very close to larger, but then there is commonly another ring, and then there is a region which is out to the perimeter of the iris. So that area closest to the pupil is about me.
Yes.
That area in the middle between myself and the extreme diameter is my relationship to people.
Right.
Now, a little bit past my relationship to people is my relationship to nature.
Right.
Just past my relationship to the global nature of the ecological experience of nature
Mm-hmm.
is my relationship to all things in spirit.
Right.
So oftentimes religious conflict is on the outside, personal conflict is on the inside.
Right. So in this inner ring, we have these areas here.
That's correct.
Very inner ring.
So this inner ring is a series of glands and organs. I'll just use these symbols here. These glands and organs, they operate both on the mother and father's side of the family. And these are the 12 glands
Mm-hmm.
that I have my own responsibility to feel.
Yes.
One of them would be my own will to survive,
Mm-hmm.
to the lowest possible level, my own will about my emotions or my passion,
Mm-hmm.
my own feelings about justice or belonging or community, or my feelings about the truth or integrity,
Right.
my own feelings about giving and receiving love with people,
Mm-hmm.
right at the heart level,
Right.
my own feelings about nature. Am I involved in cruelty, or am I involved in punishment in nature?
Mm-hmm.
Do I basically pollute and cannibalize nature, or am I in harmony with nature? That's very much
area.
where my individual will,
Mm-hmm.
does it violate the world around me or not? That's
Yeah.
called cruelty,
Yes.
or the lack of compassion.
Mm-hmm.
And then further up, also further out, is what is my own personal feeling about the existence of spirits?
Right.
How do I feel about the idea that there are spirits in the room I don't see?
Mm-hmm.
Do I totally reject them?
Mm-hmm.
Am I frightened by the existence of spirits?
Mm-hmm.
Am I in conflict with religious things on the outside? My religion is superior to yours. I don't have one.
Mm-hmm.
There is no God. You know, God's not real. God is an energy.
Mm-hmm.
God is a nothing, or
whatever we might be feeling on a spiritual level.
that's my individual responsibility to experience it on all those diameters.
Right.
Now, interesting enough, there is a pattern in life that does that very much the same way.
So many patterns that are very much alike.
That teaches that there are levels of responsibility.
Right.
So I might be able to engage in a biochemical stimulation of the glands, organs, and body systems.
For example, with herbs or nutrition.
That's
or
correct, or
minerals.
body cleansing,
Right.
right? Or exercise,
Mhm.
things like that. But without changing my corresponding responsibility to change my feeling or my belief system.
Keeps coming back.
Right, I might have a belief system that I'm not safe,
Right.
or God doesn't like me, or
Yes.
there is no God. And if I hold a untrue belief system, holding an untrue belief system in this innermost area affects the distribution of life force through the organs and body systems.
And I think one way to understand that we have an untrue belief system would be to feel if it's related to anger or fear or jealousy. Any of those feelings that might come up would have to do with an untrue belief system.
Yes, because every one of the primary ways we're reacting is usually based on some form of fear.
And it's only blocking our total expression of who we really are.
That's correct, because I might have a fear of death,
Right.
when in reality, there is no death. But I might believe this is my only existence, and as soon as I die, I'm done.
And so this area having to do with digestion and absorption, and if we have all this fear, it really affects us here in this area.
That's correct. I might have an ongoing fear of being alone or being abandoned, when in reality, we're never alone or we're never abandoned,
Yes.
because there is not a single fear which is actually true.
Yes.
So if we hold belief systems based on fears, and by the way, we all have many, this composite belief system collection now inhibits the circulation of the life force that would otherwise flow out of me through my body.
Well, it's almost like when you drop a pebble on the water and it just starts spreading out. And and a majority of people have digestive issues. And that then spreads out to the rest of the body, health-wise, emotional-wise, and all other ways.
Right, because one of the foundations of what causes digestive difficulties in the physical body, we call that number one.
Yes.
That has a lot to do with my personal self-image and the degree to which I'm willing to change, called humility.
And do I feel safe?
Do I feel safe is related to all of this.
Do I love myself?
Do I feel loved?
Do I feel loved? Yes.
Yeah, so this is not detailed, by the way.
Right.
This is the beginning of the understanding that the glands, organs, and body systems are all very much related to how I feel about who I am, how I relate to other people, and how I relate to the world. I need to be able to examine that and realize this is about myself, this is about others, this is about the greater unity. Sometimes I call it ecological unity, but it's really about the unity to all things seen and unseen.
So if we can understand that if something's going awry with the body is trying to tell us something. It's trying to express to us an avenue that's going awry to help us to bring more love in and forgiveness.
That's correct. It's our body giving us feedback that we need to examine something, and sometimes it may be something that we believe is loving, like the way that we control our children with what they eat or what they do or what they dress with, or we think, oh, I need to control or punish my children because if I don't, then I'm going to spoil them in some form or another, when in reality my belief system that says I need to control them is actually a violation of love that's continuing to damage my own body, but I believe it's loving to control them.
Yes. So ultimately we have to stop and really ask. We have to ask for the feeling to really come forward so we can feel it deeply and understand better about what's causing this.
That's correct. We need to sincerely and humbly ask to experience and feel the feelings that are causing me this pain in my body.
So just to medicate and suppress and go on with our lives like so many people are in such a hurry to do, and not connect with the body as being a real living system that is relating to them in such a way that could bring something awesome out in them, if they would do that, they just suppress and medicate.
That's correct.
And then it gets worse.
Because oftentimes...
It gets louder.
That's correct. And oftentimes what they might believe is, you know, I just kind of need to get through this life by holding all of these feelings inside and reacting, and then when I leave I'll be okay.
Yes.
When I die I'll finally be rid of all this. But in reality, if they knew the truth of it, they actually take it all with them.
Right. And we need to, as much as we can, work through things while we're here in the body.